Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this session of Elective Perspectives. Today, we're joined by Shirsho, who's going to be teaching the spring elective, Pricing Strategy and Analytics. So welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, happy to be here.
First question that we have for you, actually, could you just zoom out and give us a general overview of your course?
Sure, yeah. So I teach pricing strategy and analytics, and as the name of the course suggests, it will help you develop kind of a systematic way of thinking about how to make optimal pricing decisions in different types of situations. So we will start with some like basic economic theory of demand and supply and how prices are set in a market, things like that. But then we'll zoom in a little more to like specific marketing situations and think about what kind of data are required to make pricing decisions and how or different methods to analyze these data. So at the core of our course, we'll be thinking about value proposition to a consumer and how that relates to pricing. Of course, there are like other factors like costs and competitor actions that will also be important for pricing. And optimal pricing kind of balances like value proposition, costs, and competition. But we start off mainly with value, right? And then costs and competition will add to our analysis kind of as we go get more familiar with the course and how to think about pricing decisions. But so like the first thing we start with in the course is kind of this economic value analysis, which is a framework for you to assess like value proposition to the consumer. Right, so just how to think about value to different segments. So for example, like if there is a particular need that a consumer is satisfying with a given product at a given price, then if you are say introducing a new product into that market, what is the difference in value between the existing product and your new product? This difference in value may be different for different consumer segments. So you may have like a market of heterogeneous consumers who will use your product differently, and they may even have different like base products that they're currently using. So it's kind of a complex situation where you can say address many different segments at many different prices. So how do you then decide on like what is a single optimal price in most situations? Or if there's a situation where you can do targeted pricing, what kind of targeted pricing can you do? If you can have like multiple versions of a product that you can introduce into the market at different prices, then what should those versions look like? What would be the prices you would set? So those are basically the kinds of decisions. And then in terms of like, like what data, how do we use data to answer these questions? So I guess I don't want to say simplest, but maybe the most common type of data is just simple transaction data, so sales and price data. So think of like a grocery store example where you have like you're selling orange juice, for example, and then you change prices every week and you observe changes in demand. So how to analyze this kind of sales and price data to kind of estimate a demand curve, assess how consumers are responding to these changes in prices, and therefore how to set an optimal price for like a pack of orange juice in say a given week in a given geography, something like that. So that's like the basic thing, but many times you don't have this kind of transaction data, right? So suppose like I don't know, like you're introducing a new product, like say you're Apple, and you're developing some new tech, and it doesn't exist, or maybe like Samsung has some version of this tech already, and then you want to assess how much the consumer would be willing to pay for your Apple product, first of all, because of its brand value, and then maybe there are some differences in product features. So this is like a very typical market research type of question where you want to assess what are the consumer segments in the market, how much would they be willing to pay for these additional features of a product over an existing set of products that exist. things like that. So there is a tool called conjoint analysis or conjoint survey that market research firms generally use in order to extract consumer willingness to pay for like different product features. And so in this class, we'll learn about how to design these surveys and how to use the results of these surveys. So this is useful in cases where it's not possible to run a pricing experiment, or like you don't have ready-made like transaction data. So that's one kind of situation. Or if you you don't have existing transaction data, but you have the scope to run like a small scale actual price experiment where you can split consumers into two groups and offer one price, offer another price, and so you have like some sort of small scale experimentally generated transaction data. So that's like another type of data set that we'll be talking about, and I'll give you like real world examples where companies have used these kind of experiments to set prices. So those are like the kind of data and the kind of analysis. So that's about like so up to now is like about maybe 60 to 70% of the class is just to think about how to set optimal prices for, say, a given product in the presence of some kinds of data, or like suppose you don't have, then how do you go and generate the type of data you need. And in the rest, like 30% of the class, we'll think about the situations that I brought up earlier, which is like targeted pricing or product line pricing. You may not be constrained to set like a single price for a single product. You may be able to customize your prices to different consumer segments. So you have like a student version and a full version, or you have like a trial version and like two different full versions that cater to different consumer segments. And so you want to think about what prices to set for these different versions, because you don't want people who you want to buy like a premium version, but they decide that they'd rather have the free because you've set your premium version price too high. Things like that. Dynamic pricing. So in some products, you can segment consumers over time. So like consumers who want to buy the product initially are typically like very excited, willing to pay a high price. So you can set a high price initially, but then you'll have to cut that price over time as you address the mass market more. So all of these like specific pricing strategies that apply to different marketing situations, like targeted pricing, product line pricing, bundled pricing. So maybe you may like want to bundle two different products together, like word processing software and like analytics software, like Microsoft Office, for example, right? You have Word, Excel, PowerPoint all bundled together in one, rather than them selling these individual pieces separately. So, what kind of market is best suited for this kind of bundled pricing and what kinds of markets are suited for like individual product level pricing. So we'll tackle some of these specific situations in like the last 30% of the class. So that's, I guess, the overview of like the substantive learnings from the class, which is just like what. So yeah, you learn how to price, what kind of data you need, how to analyze these data. If they're not there, how to generate these data through surveys, and what are the different like pricing models available depending on the type of market and the type of consumer, right? So that's substantive. In terms of like evaluation and course structure, there will be both group group assignments and individual assignments. So, and there'll also be like case studies and like data-based homework assignments, right? So let me talk about the case studies first. So there'll be like one individual case, which you will do, which will be your first homework assignment, I think, due in like week 3 of the class. And then there will be three other group cases. And there will be 4 data-based homework assignments, which will be like a problem set where you will actually get your hands dirty with like R coding and like running regressions, estimating price elasticities, and then recommending some sort of a pricing decision. So that will be also like group based. And there'll be 4 of those. And then finally, like in lieu of a final exam, there will be an individual data-based assignments, which will be kind of similar to the group data assignments, but individual, and it'll cover the entire length of the course. Whereas these group things will typically deal with like what you learned in the previous 2 weeks, those topics. But then the final exam will cover the topics that you covered in the entire course, and there'll be like a data set appropriately designed so that you can answer like it'll be suitable for many different situations, and you can answer several different questions relating to topics that we cover in the beginning and at the end. So that's, I guess, overview of the course.
That was a fantastic overview, and I feel like you already answered both the questions that we had.
Okay.
Neha, do you want to ask something you were curious about?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to ask, so you talk about marketing and pricing in various scenarios. What are the key learnings from our core classes that translate well into the class? Are there any particular skills that you recommend students to brush up on, or some courses to take beforehand?
So I guess everyone would have taken the basic marketing core, right? And you will know about the 3C, 4P framework in general. So we will definitely build on that, because pricing is one of the 4Ps. So in terms of like just overall thinking about a given marketing decision, it's always useful to go back to that framework, right? Like think about the consumer, think about what are the strengths of your company, think about what the competition is doing, and therefore how can you best design your marketing mix in terms of the 4Ps. In this course, we'll also study how do the other 3Ps affect pricing power. Like one obvious one is like how do different product features yield or improve willingness to pay or reduce willingness to pay, and therefore your pricing power. In terms of the like promotion P, it's like, so suppose you run an ad campaign, you may be able to now access like a whole new set of consumers who have some new willingness to pay, or it may raise the willingness to pay of your existing consumers. In terms of place, we'll tackle like channel pricing, where you may be able to set a wholesale price and some retailer sets the retail price, and then how do you coordinate between the two. So we learn about how like this pricing P relates to the other 3Ps, and also like a more like high level thinking about consumer, company, and competition. So it'll definitely build on the marketing core, but in terms of skills, I would say, like your stats class in terms of like how to interpret a regression coefficient. So if you run a regression with like sales as the dependent variable, price, advertising, or season, like, I don't know, seasonality and things like that on the right hand side, then how do you interpret the coefficient on price that you get? So that'll be helpful. Maybe even your like micro classes will be helpful in terms of like looking at different forms of demand curves. And I would say that's kind of how this relates to your like core classes. In terms of like other marketing analytics classes, I would say there's no prerequisite that you have to have taken some other analytics class. But this is definitely a very deep dive into just the pricing part of your marketing decision making, whereas the other classes may give you like more of a like overall view, or may focus on some other like marketing mix decision. So that's how that would work. But then, yeah, in general, all of these classes are like quantitatively focused. So if you've taken some other one before, you'll know, you'll not kind of be afraid to, delve into data, run regressions and all of that. So that would definitely help. So I think like a well-prepared student would, not have trouble like running R and, loading a data set into R, running a regression, generating some plots, looking at summary statistics. But then in terms of like what skills you need to have, of course, it'll be good if you are already up and running with R, but we'll spend some time in the beginning like just walking people through, getting started with R. And also the first like data assignment will be group based, so that you can learn from other group members, and you can also like form groups optimally so that there's at least one person who is familiar with data analysis in R. But then by the end of the course, of course, I would expect that everyone catches up to the same level of proficiency, at least in terms of like being able to answer problems that we have in this course, because the final assignment, you'll have to do your R coding on your own. So by that time, I think people should catch up. Okay, so I don't know what was, I hope I've answered your question. Is that fine?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, you did answer my question. Thanks a lot.
You answered that one and more. But I hear what you're saying about especially other classes that do also utilize R, like classes within the marketing analytics specialization. And of course, there are students who come in and don't know it. And you did share that over the course of the quarter, like you will be giving students group projects and guided learning. But I guess, what would you say to students who still view that as a barrier? Like, what would you say to them so that they're not afraid to take this class just because of R?
Yeah, so so first of all, we will do some in-class demonstrations, and we'll start from like basics, So I think, yeah, of course, there'll be a steeper learning curve in terms of if you're not familiar with that. But it's not something that's super hard to pick up quickly, especially if you have access to friends who are familiar with R, or even you can approach me or the TA, and we can do something over Zoom to like help you get started. So I wouldn't take that as like a major mental barrier. But then just in terms of being prepared to like tackle a quant heavy course, I guess that may also throw some people off, that many folks most of their classes may be like very qualitative in nature, and there are like frameworks and stuff like that, but it's not like you really have like a very quantitative approach to many MBA classes, right? But this is definitely one where it'll be very quant focused. So obviously there's like the coding part, but even the group or like the case discussions will also involve doing some doing some calculations, like use data from the case, and like say like lay out different scenarios where you set different prices, calculate profit in these different scenarios, and then make a recommendation at the end. So even when you're analyzing cases, you need to have this like a quant focused or a quant approach to answering a question, rather than just like a more qualitative approach. So just like be prepared for that, I would say. But as long as you're not afraid of like a quant course, there may also be some things like in the lecture slides, I have a thing where like I show in order to optimize something, it involves some calculus, right? So for example, if you have like a function, mathematical function in some variable, you have to take the derivative of that function, set it to 0, and that will tell you what is the maximum or minimum of that, or what value of the variable will give you the max value of the function or the min value of that function. But that's only in class, and I'll do it. I'll show you how to do it, and like I won't ask you to like do any calculus for homework, something like that. But then that's another thing that may throw people off. Like I had somebody tell me previous time, like the last time I taught, that they haven't seen any calculus since high school. But that's fine, it doesn't matter. It's just so I won't ask you to do any like calculus for your homework or anything. It's just to like illustrate a point and show you that, okay, in order to optimize something like a profit function, this is the theoretical approach, which is take the derivative, set it to 0, and yeah.
Thank you. That was an amazing and comforting overview of how R and other data analytical skills will be used. I think we have time, Neha, for one more question if you want to ask it, and then we can go to Shirshow's closing thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Christine. So one question that I wanted to ask you is what sort of post-MBA career tracks or roles would would the course be most useful for? And how will students going into different industries be prepared, like nonprofit, consulting, tech? How would they be prepared to tackle their roles after taking this course?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think pricing is like a very fundamental business decision, right? And nobody wants to leave value on the table. So understanding your value proposition and how that relates to your pricing power, I think is, even if you are not the one directly responsible for making the pricing decision, it's always a useful thing to know. And obviously everyone in the company is trying to add value somehow, either in like increasing value proposition for the customer, or like cutting costs, or just something like that, right? So I think understand, like having this framework of how how your product delivers value, and therefore how you can set prices, is useful for pretty much anyone. But of course, the people who will directly be using like the tools that I teach in class will be people in analytics or market research. These folks will like actually design the surveys and like analyze survey results or analyze transaction data. But then even at the higher level, like the people that these analytics and market research folks are giving inputs to, like a brand manager or a product manager or even consulting folks, like use these surveys all the time, right? So it'll be useful for like that higher level person as well to understand what these folks are telling you and how to interpret their results and how to basically use that to make a decision at the end. So yeah, I think it's very broadly applicable.
Thank you for answering that question. Christine, I'll hand it to you.
I know we've covered a lot about your class in the last 20 or so minutes, but what are your final thoughts that you would like to share for students considering whether or not they bid for your class?
Sure. So first, yeah, as I said before, pricing is a very fundamental business decision. So I think anyone involved in any business should know like the general approach to pricing. In today's world, I think, first of all, there's more and more like transaction data available, and also consumers are willing to share more and more data about themselves. So like having the skills to, first of all, be able to analyze existing data, but also to know like how to get what you need out of consumers, or the data that you need, in order to be able to segment, in order to be able to tell how much each consumer is willing to pay for your product. Those are fundamental skills to have, I think, in today's world. And even if you're not directly involved in pricing, so first, any other marketing decision, I already told you, how these can affect pricing. So like those folks should know the impact that it has. And ultimately everyone in a company is building towards some value proposition and therefore some price, and pricing is the P of marketing that ultimately captures value for the company. So I think, yeah, this is like useful for pretty much anyone in any business to know. So that's my pitch. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pause the recording here.